Hi there, I'm Dre, host and founder of the Dragon Network. On today's video, I want to continue the conversation around agile frameworks that can be used for project management. And over the last couple weeks, we took a look at Kanban as well as Scrum. I'm going to link in the description below to both of those videos if you haven't seen them yet. And today I actually want to talk about a combination of the two, which is commonly referred to as Scrumban. So with both Scrum and Kanban, there are certain elements that lend themselves well to healthcare IT, as well as some challenges. So instead of trying just to force one to fit with a particular project or a particular operational activity, there's a combination we can use where it takes the best of both worlds. So from the Scrum framework, we're going to take the concrete deliverables, the time-blocked activities, as well as the regular meetings, and we're going to combine that with the visualization that we get from Kanban, as well as the limits we see on the work in progress and the continuous flow of activities through the process. So there's not sort of the definitive start and end with Kanban, it just is an ongoing process, and that's why it lends itself better to operations. So this hybrid model was created many years ago when organizations that were familiar with doing projects based on the Scrum methodology started to incorporate more of the Kanban methods and frameworks into their operational practices and started really seeing some of the benefits of that visualization and that continuous process flow. So they combine the two together. So there's a couple of key elements with the team structure when we look at Scrumban. So there are still teams that are allocated, but there isn't a rigid number of people that belong to the teams, and there isn't defined roles within them. So the teams are actually just comprised of generalists and specialists, and really anyone who is going to help participate actively in delivering what needs to be delivered as part of that task output. So we still have an iterative approach to actually performing tasks with Scrumban, but the iterations are broken down into much smaller time segments. They're actually in 1 to 2 week segments, and the way that work flows through them is a little bit different. So before I get into that, I actually would like to talk about a bigger aspect of Scrumban that is very helpful and sort of helps lend its way through the entire process, and that's the concept of the prioritization buckets. So with Scrumban, there's 3 main buckets that are created for all work that's going to go through this process. And those are the 1-year bucket, the 6-month bucket, and the 3-month bucket. So these 3 buckets were put in place to help support larger, more complex projects as they made their way through this framework. So the 1-year bucket is going to contain the long-term vision or the long-term goals that the overall or overarching project actually has. This is sometimes referred to as the idea bucket. So it does contain elements that are associated with the project or with the initiative, but they have a longer runway. It is typically 1 year or less. There are some instances where projects will span multi-year, so you may have a couple in there that stretch a little bit over. But for the most part, they're things that are going to be accomplished within the next 12 months or so that are aligned with the overall visions and the outcome that you're hoping to achieve. For healthcare organizations going through a Scrumban framework, it's not unusual for that 1-year bucket to be assigned after a strategic planning effort, so a 1 to 3 year strategic planning outlook or a large project initiative prioritization round where you have something that is of significance that is actually going to be placed on the roadmap for the next year or so. So once you've got something there, the next space that it's going to go to is in the 6-month bucket. So the 6-month bucket is actually where a lot of the planning is going to happen and all of the requirements gathering is going to take place. So you are, with the appropriate bandwidth, going to request that an item be moved over. Once it's in that 6-month space, you're actually going to do a deeper dive on what's required. So what are the tasks that are associated? How will those be broken down? What are the requirements? What are we going to actually do for output? And you're going to really just take a look at that and put some analysis and put some structure around the elements that have moved into the 6-month bucket. So those are things that are approved to move forward, and the team has support from leadership, support from the organization to actually place effort on going through the analysis and activities. So it's not just in the idea phase anymore, it's actually been agreed to that that is going to move forward, and it's the initial pieces of that movement forward. Once you get something over to this 6-month bucket and you start doing that deep dive, there may be some additional prioritization that takes place, especially if you discover something in the requirements gathering that indicates that something needs to be done sooner rather than later. But this is really dependent on the types of activities that are in there as well as the overall project goals. So following the 6-month bucket, we have a 3-month bucket, which is where the actual work is going to take place for the delivery of the activities or the product. In this bucket, again, we're going to limit our work in progress, and things are only going to be requested to be moved over to the 3-month bucket once we know that there's bandwidth. So it is still that look back and request something move in. So similar to the way that that occurred with Kanban. So you're going to look to the 6-month bucket, bring the work over, and in this 3-month space, that's where they're actually going to be broken down even further into the discrete tasks that actually need to be actioned by individual team members. So these tasks are typically the 1 to 2 week duration that are going to be iteratively worked on until everything is complete. So the tasks over here are going to be individual in nature or very small team focused, so that you actually have some concrete parameters around what actually needs to get done, when it needs to get done, and it can fit in that 1 to 2 week time frame. And you're actually going to start tracking the activities within this 3-month bucket on their iterations on a Scrumban board. So taking some aspects from those Kanban visualization boards, the Scrumban board is going to actually be a little bit more simplistic. And what you really need to make sure you have is a to-do, doing, and a done column. You can absolutely break that down further if it is something that you need to do from an organizational perspective, or if oversight sort of dictates that you keep a little bit better track of things. But the main headers or the main overarching columns are just going to be to do, doing, and done. So as things move their way through the process, you're going to have individuals that are going to, reach to the to-do column, pick something that they can work on, move it over to the doing, actually action that again in those 1 to 2 week iterations, and then move it over to the done. And that process is going to continue until you have very few things left in the to-do column and a lot of things that are in the done column. Once you've reached the stage where you have minimal things in the to-do column, that's when you can actually go and call back over to that 6-month bucket group and request additional work come over. So the entire process just continues throughout time, with things continually being added into the 1 year, the 6-month, and the 3-month buckets, and sort of cycling their way through things. One of the key aspects of this Scrumban model is the self-monitoring or the self-motivated teams. So it's individuals that are actually going to reach out when they have the bandwidth and go to that to-do board. You are going to have regular meetings so that you can understand where everything is. And frequently there is actually a physical board that you're going to track things through the process. So there's a project manager or an operational manager that can actually see what the overall work is being done. One of the challenges that people say that they have with this particular method is that it can sometimes be difficult to assess how much work is being done by a particular individual, or to make sure that there's a quality in the work being distributed. So you tend to have people who are go-getters wanting to continually pick up and to continually focus on things, whereas some of the others who may not be as motivated may tend to not reach back to pick up new to-do items quite as frequently as the others. So the other thing that you really have to watch for when you're going through a Scrumban type model or type framework is that you continue to have the focus on one task at a time. So you don't want individuals, since they are going out to grab their own work, you don't want them picking up 16 things at once and trying to multitask their way through. That actually won't work for the process and will just sort of start to create a little bit of chaos. You will still notice if they focus on individual tasks and if there is that sequence of moving through sort of in a methodical type way. You will still see the bottlenecks. You'll still see sort of where they happen to be, especially if you break down those to do, doing, and done columns a little bit further. But you're not going to have quite the same level of distinct and discrete oversight that you would with Kanban. So you're going to have that iterative type approach, you're going to have regular check-ins, you're going to have movement forward and delivery frequently, but you're still going to have a little bit of analysis so you can check to see where there's process gaps or where you need to make some changes. So Scrumban is something that is actually used quite frequently for build team members. So you can, of course, use the other two methods. I mentioned that Kanban is often used for operations, to go through operational processes and try to find really where those lean opportunities are. Scrumban is something that can be utilized for, typical build activities, requests that are coming in from end users sort of on a steady stream. So for things that are in that space where they're not quite a full-blown project that requires the rigorous oversight of project management, but they do require significant amounts of work and they may take months to actually complete. So they can be broken down further into discrete tasks and rolled up sort of into larger groupings and are going to take a while to sort of actually implement, but they're not necessarily something that needs that strong oversight of budget, time, resourcing, and full project management methodology behind it. So in my experience, I actually have found the Scrumban method to be used much more frequently than both Scrum on its own or Kanban on its own. This hybrid type model is something that you find lends itself well to a variety of different areas, and you will find the formality around it will really depend on who is managing the activities. You do still also have the ability to call retrospective type meetings, so to check in on the process as it occurs, to make sure the process itself doesn't need any tweaking or to make changes if it does. So today's video was fairly short. I did just want to make sure that we touched on the fact that you could combine those two together to form a hybrid type framework, and that that's something that you may frequently see in the healthcare IT space. Now that you know what it is, you can start to recognize when it's occurring and see if you can help out with the process. So I hope you're having a great day and that you continue to have a good week. I will see you again next time, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to be notified when the next video comes out.